The stale air of the office pressed in on Reid, a familiar weight. Fluorescent lights hummed, a monotonous lullaby to a life he hadn't chosen but had, by slow degrees, accepted. His days were a predictable cycle of spreadsheets and lukewarm coffee, his evenings a blur of takeout and half-watched documentaries. He was adrift, unmoored, yet too comfortable in his inertia to notice how much the current had already pulled him under. Then the phone rang, a shrill intrusion. It was a lawyer, his voice clipped and formal. "Mr. Reid Vance? I'm calling regarding the estate of Elias Vance." Reid frowned. Elias? Reid. Reid barely knew him. A distant cousin, Reid think? Indeed. He passed away suddenly. Mysteriously, some might say. His will specifies you as the sole heir to his property in Blackwood Forest. Blackwood Forest. The name alone felt like a premonition, a dark whisper from a forgotten past. Reid had vague memories of his grandmother mentioning an eccentric uncle who lived off the grid. He'd never imagined he'd inherit anything from him. A cabin, the lawyer continued, deep in the woods. Very isolated. Are you interested in claiming it? Reid hesitated. Isolated, you say? Completely. No neighbors for miles. No cell service, either. But it's yours, Mr. Vance. And it comes with a history. A history. The words echoed in Reid's mind as he drove, the mundane world receding with every mile. The highway gave way to winding backroads, then to a barely there dirt track swallowed by an ancient, oppressive forest. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy of oak and pine, casting the world in a perpetual twilight. The air grew heavy, smelling of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. The track ended abruptly at a clearing. And there it was. A single, massive iron door, pocked with rust and age, was set into the front. It looked less like a home and more like a tomb. A shiver traced Reid's spine. He killed the engine. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth and the faint, rhythmic drip. Drip. Drip from somewhere deep within the structure. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated in the ground beneath his feet, a low thrum that settled in his bones. He approached the door, his hand trembling as he inserted the key. It turned with a groan that echoed like a dying man's last breath. The interior was a single, large room, choked with dust and the scent of mildew, stale air, and that same metallic tang. Sparse, heavy furniture, a table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot, stood like silent sentinels. There were no visible windows from the inside, only thick, unyielding walls of stone. It was as if the place was meant to keep something in, not merely keep the elements out. Only the drip, drip, drip answered him, a little louder now, somewhere behind the far wall. He spent the first few days in a haze of unpacking and disquiet. The cabin, as he stubbornly called it, felt less like an inheritance and more like a burden. He tried to clean, but the dust seemed to regenerate, clinging to everything like a fine shroud. The strange occurrences began subtly. A floorboard would creak upstairs, but there was no upstairs. A faint scratching sound, like claws on stone, would emanate from the walls, only to cease the moment he stopped to listen. He'd leave a book on the table, only to find it on the cot an hour later. A cup he'd used would be moved to a different shelf. He rationalized it, of course. Old house settling, he'd muttered to himself, just my imagination playing tricks. But the seed of doubt had been planted, slowly germinating in the fertile ground of his isolation. One evening, while trying to light the old oil lamp, there was no electricity. As the lawyer had warned, his fingers brushed against a loose panel in the side of the crude wooden desk. Curiosity overriding his growing apprehension, he pried it open. Inside, nestled amongst cobwebs and dried leaves, was a small, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn smooth, the pages brittle with age. It belonged to Elias Vance. Reid opened it. The handwriting was spidery, almost illegible in places, but the words leaped out at him. The hunger grows. It demands its due. The pact holds, but for how much longer? Reid frowned, reading on. Elias's entries became increasingly disjointed, filled with references to the weeper, the barrow, and the lineage. There were frantic sketches of symbols, intricate and disturbing, that resembled twisted roots or grasping hands. I see them, the others. Or so Reid hoped. What were you doing out here, Elias? Reid murmured to the empty room, the faint drip, drip, drip now a constant backdrop to his thoughts. What did you get yourself into? The minor disturbances soon escalated. One night, a heavy book of local folklore, which he'd found on a dusty shelf and had been meaning to read, flew off the table with a startling thud, landing face down at his feet. Reid jumped, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't rationalize that away. The cabin was no longer just an old house, it was alive, and it was angry. He pored over Elias's journal, trying to find answers, desperate to understand. He found old maps of the area, crudely drawn, with symbols marking specific points. One symbol, a circle with a jagged line through it, was prominent, labeled the barrow. It was located just beyond the cabin's property line, deep in the densest part of the forest. He also found a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings. Disappearances. Always in the Blackwood Forest. Always within a few miles of Elias's property. It feeds on the living, on their light, their identity. The Vance line, we are the guardians. We are the gatekeepers. Sacrifice? Guardians? This wasn't just an old man's delusion, it was a legacy. His legacy. He tried to call for help, but his phone remained a useless brick. No signal. While trying to fix a flickering oil lamp one evening, his hand brushed against a section of the stone wall near the fireplace. It felt different, smoother. He pressed. A faint click echoed. Reid stared, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't a cabin. This was a facade. A heavily camouflaged entrance. He grabbed the oil lamp and stepped into the passage, his heart thundering. The walls were rough-hewn stone, expertly fitted, not natural rock. This was built deliberately. He followed the passage for what felt like an eternity, the drip, drip, drip growing louder, more insistent, a morbid pulse. The passage opened into a vast, cavernous chamber, roughly circular, carved out of the earth. Around it, smaller alcoves were carved into the walls, each containing a wooden box. He opened the nearest box. Inside, another journal, older, its leather cover crumbling, and another. Dozens of them, stretching back generations, each belonging to a Vance. He recognized the symbols from Elias's journal etched into the stone altar. He picked up one of the oldest journals, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was elegant, almost scholarly, from a man named Thomas Vance, dated 1888. The pact was sealed by our ancestor, Ilara Vance, generations ago, Thomas had written. The land was cursed, the entity, the weeper, ravenous. It threatened to consume all, but Ilara, in her desperation, offered a bargain. Not blood, not flesh, but the identity of one of her line, every cycle. A conduit, a vessel, to contain the entity, to keep it from spreading beyond these grounds. The cabin, this bunker, was built to facilitate this. This wasn't a cabin in the woods, it was a prison, a containment facility, designed to trap something ancient and malevolent. And Elias had been the last host. His sudden, mysterious death wasn't a passing, it was a transfer. He flipped through another journal, this one from a Clara Vance, dated 1947. The weeper does not kill, not truly. It devours the self. It twists the mind, warps memories, until the host becomes an echo, a part of its endless hunger. We are bound to it. We are the stewards, the keepers of the curse. And when our time comes, we yield. For the sake of the world above. Reid's hands trembled, dropping the journal. He was the next in line. He was the next sacrifice. The entity wasn't just tied to the land, it was tied to him, through his blood, through this twisted lineage. Elias's death wasn't just a signal, it was an invitation. The air in the bunker grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. They were clear, insidious, echoing not from the walls, but from within his own mind. Welcome, Reid. You have come home. His own memories began to fray at the edges. He saw his face reflected in the polished surface of the stone altar, but it wasn't his face. It was Elias's, then another, older, gaunter face he recognized from a faded photograph in one of the journals. You are us. Your life, your past. It is a dream. Objects began to move with violent intent. A heavy wooden stool flew across the chamber, shattering against the far wall. He saw his reflection in a small, tarnished mirror he'd found in Elias's living quarters, but the image was distorted, stretched, his features elongating, his eyes deepening into black pools. He clawed at his face, trying to feel his own skin, to confirm his own reality. No, he screamed, his voice raw, hoarse. I'm Reid. I'm not Elias. I'm not them. Your name is a whisper in the wind. Yourself, a fleeting thought. We remember you. We are all of you. He saw his colleague, Sarah, standing in the corner of the bunker, him face pale, eyes wide with fear. Reid? What have you done? She cried, her voice trembling. Then her image dissolved into a swirl of black mist, replaced by a grotesque, shifting silhouette that seemed to mock him. The entity was twisting his perception, manipulating his memories, trying to make him doubt his very existence. It wasn't just after a sacrifice, it wanted to become him, to absorb his identity into the endless chorus of Vances, perpetuating its own horrific existence. Desperate, Reid stumbled, trying to find a way out. He slammed his fist against the bunker walls, futilely searching for another hidden mechanism, another passage. He tried to destroy the journals, tearing at their brittle pages, but they resisted, like ancient hide, and the symbols on the altar glowed with a faint, malevolent light, mocking his efforts. The bunker itself seemed to shift around him, the corridors twisting, doors appearing where there were none, then vanishing. He scrambled back to the passage leading to the surface, but it had changed. It was longer, narrower, the air thick with a cloying sweetness that made his head spin. He could hear faint sounds from above ground now, not the wind, not the rustling leaves, but faint, mournful wails, like the cries of lost souls. His phone. He fumbled for it, needing to reach someone, anyone. He found a brief, miraculous flicker of signal. It's Reid Vance. Elias. Elias Vance. The cabin. It's not what it seems. There's something here. Something ancient. It's trying to take me. There was a pause, a crackle of static. Then, the detective's voice, calm, almost dismissive. Mr. Vance? You sound distressed. Are you all right? There's nothing unusual about that property. Elias Vance passed away from natural causes. Just an old man, alone in the woods. You should get some rest. The voice was too calm, too detached, almost echoing the entity's own placid cruelty. It sounded distorted, as if coming from a great distance, or through a thick, suffocating veil. No! Reid cried, you don't understand. It's a bunker. It's a prison. They're all here. The Vances. They're trapped. The line went dead. The signal vanished. He was truly alone. He tried to run, to push through the twisting passages, but the bunker was a living maze. Walls bled a black, oily ichor that smelled of decay. Spectral figures, pale and translucent, flickered in the periphery. Their features indistinct, but their eyes were filled with the same ancient weariness he'd seen in Elias's reflection. Join us. Become us. Reid stumbled into the central chamber again, exhausted, his sanity fraying like old rope. He looked at his reflection in the altar, and this time, there was no single face staring back. It was a shifting mosaic of faces, Elias, Thomas, Clara, countless others, their features merging, dissolving, reforming. You are ours. You are us. You are the weeper. He closed his eyes, the metallic tang of the air filling his lungs, the low hum resonating through his bones, no longer a vibration, but a part of him,